Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvisavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May He protect us, may He sustain us, may we grow in strength together, may our study together be fruitful, and may we not hate one another. Om peace, peace, peace. So good morning, and welcome to the service. This morning, Swami Varadananda, he left for Los Angeles about 4 o'clock in the morning. So he's been doing a series of talks on why we should meditate, theory and practice. So I'll kind of continue that topic, but I'll be replacing him today. He'll be getting back on Friday. So the last 4 years or so, I think since we moved here, we were studying the book, Meditations Practices, in our Friday night class, and we finished it right before Swami Varadananda came. And as I said at the beginning of that class, we need to understand what the purpose of meditation is. Why should we meditate? Why does it play such an important role in spiritual life? In order to understand that, we need to understand what do we mean by spiritual life. Because many people are kind of vague about it. There are hundreds of techniques of meditation out there, but the goal of all meditation is the same. And that's ultimately to achieve union with God, or realization of God, to actually experience the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality behind the universe. And particularly the Hindu scriptures, have emphasized that a key element, a central element in attaining this experience of reality is meditation. Now in the West, in America particularly, this wasn't always the case. Up until the influx of Hindu thought, Indian thought back in the 60s or so, nobody in America meditated, hardly anybody at all. And though if somebody did, people thought they needed a psychiatrist or something. They said, why are you sitting in a corner not doing anything? Go get a job, do something. But so like that, is religion is different than spirituality. A person can be very religious. He can be go to church every Sunday. He can be a very good person, a very fine person. He can be very devoted to God, but still not be spiritual. Because spiritual involves a change in consciousness. A person can be very good, but yet he's still an ordinary human being, having ordinary human experience. But spirituality means ultimately opening up a whole new realm of experience. Now in India, in ancient times in India, you had the great rishis, the great sages who, they made this journey. And what they discovered is that the only place you're going to find God, the only place you're going to find the ultimate reality of things is within your own inner consciousness. And this is where meditation plays such an important part. In one of the Upanishads, it says that God has destroyed the senses by making them outgoing. Almost all the time we're involved in the world outside ourselves. The world that we see through the senses and experience in our everyday life, this is where all of our attention is focused. And because of that, we're not aware of what's within us. It's like you have a beautiful painting, but if you have your back to the painting, you're looking in the opposite direction, you won't know it's there. You may be just a foot away from the painting, but you won't know it's there because you're not looking in the right direction. And this is a problem for human beings, is that we spend all our time kind of looking away from God. looking away from ourselves and looking out towards what's going on out there. And in meditation, essentially what you're trying to do is to reverse that process. Instead of always going outwards, you try to sit quietly and start to bring your attention back within. Now, Swami Vivekananda has said that we all exist as three different beings simultaneously. At one level, we exist as a human being, as a physical being, aware of the body and the sense experiences. At another level, though, we exist as mind. And at the third level, the deepest level, we exist as Atman or spirit. Now, all three of these levels of consciousness, these levels of our being, they're with us all the time simultaneously. But what we, for practical purposes, what we become, it depends on where we attach our attention. When our attention is attached, focused entirely on the external world, the physical world, then our consciousness, our sense of identity, of who we are, and our experience, it becomes physical. And so then you live your life primarily as just a physical being, and if you're totally physical, not much better than an animal. This animal lives in the sense world. You know, they're aware of what's happening. But outside. But some people are, throughout history, they have begun to become more introspective, to begin to turn their attention inside, and there they discover the realm of the mind. That in addition to the physical body, the physical experiences and so forth, there's within us, there's also the mind. And as a person begins to focus on that, on the realm of thought, of learning, of inspiration, of beauty, all these things, it opens up a whole vast realm of experience that's far beyond what we experience at the purely physical level. And now as we redirect our attention towards the mind, then the mind and the mental experiences coming with it, they become more prominent in our life, and the physical experiences, they tend to recede into the background. And so gradually we achieve a shift from being purely physical, purely limited to what we experience through the senses, to the mind where we get understanding, we get knowledge, we get appreciation of things, and we open up a whole vast type of existence that's far beyond what a person can experience only at the physical level. Yeah, I remember when I joined the Army. I'd gone to college, then afterwards, this was back in the days of Vietnam, and the Army was waiting. As soon as you finished college, they were waiting for you. But it was there when I went, I hadn't appreciated my college experience that much. But when I went into basic training, and I was with people who had just barely made it through high school, who didn't know anything, the thing that struck me was how small their world is. Basically, their world was what's happening to me. They didn't know anything about culture, art, history, all these things. You know? And so I realized, appreciated them, of all the kind of things that had been taught to me in college, that just, it expanded my consciousness. My world was much bigger than just what I'm having for lunch or what's going on today. It was filled with kind of ideas about philosophy and about history and about all these things, science, and understanding was there. And so when you can live at the purely physical level, you live in a very small world of your own personal experience. But you have the capacity to expand your mind, to expand your consciousness to include the whole universe. And we've seen the results of this in our modern age, of how vast the mind of man has reached, in all these, and just starting about the beginning of the 20th century, we saw the automobiles, planes, we've been on the moon, all these things have come. And they've come because man, through his mind, has been able to tap into the kind of universal consciousness of the world and begin to open up infinite varieties. So a purely physical person is, like I said, living pretty much at the animal level. And his life will go on pretty much the same day after day after day. But when man begins to reach the mental level and begin to uncover the powers and the experiences that are available through the mind, then he has the capacity to expand his consciousness, his world, tremendously. And it's only at the mental level has been the source of human civilization. When man was purely physical, they lived, they hunted, they fished, they lived in the forest, they fought with each other, and not much else. But when man began to discover the realm of mind, then we see how human civilization and culture has developed. And so all of human civilization is a result of the mind. But there's a deeper level still that as a person goes really deep within, through meditation and so forth, he begins to realize that in addition to my mind, in addition to my thoughts and my feelings and desires and things, memories and things going on, there's something else here. There's a deeper level of consciousness, which is aware of the mind, but which is actually something different than the mind. And it's at that point that you begin to become aware of the presence of God within you. Because that consciousness, which is experiencing the things of the mind, that consciousness is something different, and that consciousness is ultimately your spiritual nature. Now, as human beings, we actually are divine spirit, eternal spirit, but we've connected with our instruments. Instrument of the body and the instrument of the mind, and through these instruments we're able to experience life. We're able to be in the world, to play our part in the world, to go through different experiences in the world. But the one who's using these instruments, the one who's using the body and who's using the mind, is actually something completely different. And this is what ultimately you're trying to reach, is to discover who you really are. Now in Hinduism, when they talk about kind of the goal of spiritual life, or the ultimate reality of yourself, they often refer to as the Atman. The word Atman, it means self, because that's self, that spiritual presence within, is who you are. Now 99% of people, if you ask them who they are, they say, well, I'm this body. It's 62 years old, or it's this or that, or I'm this mind. I'm these feelings, I'm these attitudes and opinions and things, this personality, this is who I am, this individual here. But in truth, the self of who each and every one of us is a wonderful, divine, spiritual being, eternal, ever with God, and always filled with the glory, the wisdom, the love, the power of the divine. But when we take on our human nature, when we become identified with these instruments, body and mind, then we say, no, I'm just this body and this mind, and that's all I am. In the experiences that I'm going through, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but always very limited, these experiences, this is all I am. But yet all the time, there's a vast, vast, infinite realm of consciousness within us. And in order to understand this, you have to realize that consciousness, what they call pure consciousness, or chit, this consciousness actually comes from Brahman itself. You know, as most of you know, by now they say that Brahman, the ultimate reality that's indescribable. But the closest they can come is that it's Satchitananda. Existence, consciousness, and bliss. It's absolute existence, absolute consciousness, absolute bliss. But this isn't what we experience. What we experience is existence, but it's a very limited existence. We experience existence as a human being. And we know, okay, maybe I'll live 100 years, 80 years, however we'll live a certain very limited length of time, and I have certain limited powers, certain abilities to apply. And we experience consciousness of being the mind, that I understand things and so on, but yet also that understanding, that consciousness, that knowledge is very relative. That I remember we knew a person who was senior astronomer at the Adler Planetarium. And one time I went to visit him with Dr. Sasaburi. He was a Sanskrit professor, the stake of the for a while. And the some scientific journal, they had just come out with whole new dates for all the different Jurassic period, this period, that period. And then the astronomer was complaining. He said, "Oh, now I have to learn a whole bunch of new dates." So if you're a scientist, the knowledge you got at school, 5 years later is probably obsolete, and you have to relearn everything again. So our knowledge, our awareness is relative. In the same way, our existence is relative. But underlying that very limited existence and that limited consciousness is the one consciousness. Now, when it becomes identified with these instruments, it takes on the limitations of those instruments. And this Shankaracharya used to refer to as upadis, as limiting adjuncts. In other words, we take on the idea, I'm the body. And then we say, okay, then we take on the qualities of the body, the limitations of the body. Now, we may be very happy with ourselves. We may think, oh, I'm just a wonderful person. I'm beautiful, I'm intelligent, and this and that. We may have very good qualities, but all the time we become something very small, very limited. And we form various opinions about society, about other people, things like that. But again, it's a very limited understanding, a very limited awareness of what they are. But when you begin to move beyond this identification with body and mind, you begin to open up to the reality, your real self, who you really are, and then you begin to open up to the divinity that's there within. It's within you, and it's also within every person. So spiritual life, ultimately, spiritual practice means to try to achieve a shift in consciousness. First of all, you shift from the physical, external consciousness. You begin to bring the mind within and become aware of the inner mental realm and all the expanded vision and powers that are there. But eventually you go deeper still and become aware of the Atman, of the real self that you are, of the one who's actually you, who's just using these bodies temporarily as its instruments. And so this is the idea behind the whole process of meditation, the whole practice, is ultimately you want to shift in consciousness from physical to mental and finally to this deeper spiritual level, where you begin to feel the presence of God, a living reality within your own consciousness, which is much beyond even the powers of the mind. And so this is the goal. Like I said, there are hundreds of different techniques or methods of meditation, but ultimately they're all trying to go in the same direction. First of all, withdraw your mind from the external world, bring it within, begin to become aware of the mind and begin to kind of purify the mind, and then finally begin to go even deeper to the underlying spiritual consciousness. Now, the approach to meditation, there's two basic schools, two basic approaches. One is called Raja Yoga, which is kind of the yoga of meditation, and the other is called Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. Now, in Raja Yoga, which is based primarily on the yoga efforts of Patanjali, they describe an 8-step process by which a person can attain mastery, control over the mind, over the mental world, and eventually realize the highest truth. And basically, it is that the mind is like a lake, and the lake is all turned up in all kinds of different ways and things, so you can't see what's underneath. But if you can quiet the mind down, if you can quiet all the ripples and waves down, then the water becomes clear. Like some places like down in the Bahamas, the water is so clear you can see the fish and everything underneath you. So like that, the practice in the Raja Yoga is to try to get the mind completely kind of calm and clear, and then suddenly you can see through it and say, oh, this is a reality. Now there's 8 steps, stages in the practice of Raja Yoga. The first 5 are kind of preparatory, preliminary steps. And the first 2 are called Yama and Niyama. These are basic moral observances, things like ahimsa, not stealing, study, worship of God, and so forth, to try to become, first of all, before you begin the practice, to become a good ethical person, to become a moral person, and to, because as the mind becomes concentrated, and this is the idea behind Raja Yoga, is you're trying to achieve concentration of mind. But as the mind becomes concentrated, it becomes more powerful. And any power, whether it's scientific power, technological power, or any kind of power, can be used either for good or for bad. In other words, a person who's physically very strong, he can do very good work, very good physical, or he can become a bully. It depends how he uses that power. And so before, the very basis of the practice of Raja Yoga, of developing the mind, is, first of all, we want to kind of become a good, decent person that won't use this kind of increasing power to dominate or harm other people. And so that's the first 2 steps, called Yama and Niyama. Then it comes asana, or posture. Now in asana, it doesn't mean necessary, it doesn't mean sitting cross-legged or in the lotus posture or anything else. What it means is to sit in a firm position that's comfortable, with your head, neck, and spine in a straight line, and that you can sit in for a long time without being disturbed by it. The idea is you're trying to shift your consciousness from the physical awareness inwards towards the mental awareness, so you want to be able to forget about the body. And that's hard to do if every time you start to get concentrated, you fall off your chair. So you want something that's stable and that's solid. And also, it's hard to do if your knees are hurting or itches are going on. So it takes a little time, but in practice, you will be able to find a comfortable, stable, and steady position where you can sit for a long time without thinking about the body. Now, in America, most people, when they talk about yoga, they're talking about hatha yoga, the physical exercises. And this also is a part of the preparation, of the preliminary practice, because if the body is healthy, it's much easier to forget about it. If the body is exhausted and tired and worn out, or got all kinds of aches and pains, it's always there. It's very hard to lift your consciousness beyond the body. So getting, doing it, and not necessarily, pumping iron and being able to lift 200 pounds, that's not necessary. But to have your body basically in good health, in good shape, is very helpful, particularly in the beginning. Someone who's advanced yeah, maybe they can just go into samadhi at will and not worry about the body. But in the earlier stages, overcoming body consciousness is much, much easier if the body is basically not bothering you, if it's not distracting you. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. So the third step then is called asana, or posture. And like I said, it's primarily just getting a good, stable posture where you can just completely forget about the body altogether. And in fact, this is one of the sure signs that you've achieved some degree of concentration, is that during that period, you're totally unaware of where you are. If you close your eyes and get into deep meditation, you won't be aware that you're in this room, that there's other people around, that there's birds chirping or cars going by. Because when you truly shift consciousness, body consciousness drops away and you're at the inner kind of mental consciousness. So asana is any posture that kind of helps you to achieve that. Now the fourth step in Raja Yoga is called pranayama. Now pranayama is normally associated with breathing exercises, but it's actually something more subtle than that. Prana is the basic life force that we all live on. It's the energy, the power that keeps our body alive, keeps it functioning. It's called, that life force is called prana. And pranayama means control of the prana. And usually it's done through some kind of breathing exercise, various types of deep breathing or different practices. But the idea is that if you generate a little more energy, and if you have it under control, then that's beneficial in achieving a meditative state of mind. That it helps you to, it energizes the mind. And so it becomes then, meditation all becomes much more deeper then. And the fifth preliminary step is called pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses. This is the ability to, first of all, withdraw your senses completely from the external world, from the sense world. Because only when that's done, if you're aware of what's going on around you, you're not yet near concentration. It's only when the body and the external world is totally forgotten that you're able to go deeper into the meditation. And so that pratyahara, that withdrawal of the senses. And then finally, you come to the last three steps, which are called dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi, complete absorption. Now in dharana, or concentration, it means that for a very brief time, maybe only a few seconds, but for a brief time, you're able to get totally focused on what you're trying to meditate on. And like I said, at that time, when you get that focus, everything else is forgotten. You're totally absorbed in what you're meditating on. And typically, it'll be only like a glimpse. It'll be a very brief thing. Now, when that ability to concentrate, to get focused, deeply focused on one thing, when you're able to keep that going over a longer time, then it's called dhyana or meditation. Dhyana meditation is described as a continuous flow of thought towards the object of your meditation without distractions. And then the third stage, samadhi, means you get completely absorbed, and this is where kind of real transformations begin to take place. We don't realize, and this is a very kind of deep subject, but we don't realize that we, this human being, this human identity, this human personality, this sense of ego, that I'm this individual here, all of that is actually a creation of thought. And when we stop all those thoughts that are kind of creating this personal sense of self, this individual self, when we eliminate all of those kind of thoughts, we suddenly open up a whole new realm of consciousness, which is something different than our personal self. And this is called samadhi, when that's achieved. So this is the process of Raja Yoga, where they take the mind, and the mind, which is normally in a very scattered condition, which means with every thought we have about what we're trying to think about, there's like 100 other thoughts come in. And we may be trying to think, let's say, about mathematics right now. But yet, 100 other thoughts thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow? What happened in school? Where am I going? What is going on around here? So a little bit of our mind is usually only able to function the way we want it to function. And so it's very ineffective. It works, but it's very ineffective. And this is called the scattered mind, which is the normal mental condition. Now, if you can take that same scattered mind and learn how to completely focus it on one particular thing, whatever thought you choose to think of, then that same mind becomes very powerful. And whenever I talk to school kids, I usually use the example how if you go outside, like today, the sun's there, shining, you're getting warmth out of the sun. But now you take a magnifying glass and you focus those same sun's rays, and now it's so hot you can set things on fire, like a little piece of paper or a leaf or something. The mind is the same way. In a scattered condition, unconcentrated condition, it can get us through life. It gets us through school, we can do our work, we can function, and we can get along okay. But if we can learn how to concentrate that mind, to bring it to one point and hold it there, then that same mind becomes tremendously powerful. And probably this is the secret of success. In probably any case, whether it's science or business or anything, the person who can achieve tremendous concentration on what he's trying to do is the one who achieves success. And this is probably the only common element among people who have succeeded in whatever, is they were able to focus on their goal, on what they were trying to achieve, and kind of center their attention on that instead of going all different directions. And so they achieve success. And so the mind, like I said, everybody's got a mind to some extent. Every mind functions, but it functions, and usually in a very haphazard, irregular fashion. And like I said, it just more or less gets us through life. But there is a potential there for each person to take that same instrument of mind and to learn how to really develop its powers. Just as your body may be physically sort of okay, unless you really have some serious disease or something, your body is probably okay, but you're not really full of energy or full of zest or full of enthusiasm, But if you train the body, you go to a gym, you start working out, then you find, I'm getting more energy. The whole of life is getting better because I'm feeling much more alive now. And in the same way, the mind, which is getting us sort of through life, has the capacity to do wonderful things if we learn how to actually use it. And this is another factor of this control of mind. In other words, in meditation, and this is the basic technique in Raja Yoga, is that you take one thing and you say, okay, this is my object of meditation. I'm going to think about this one thing, I'm not going to think about anything else. Every time I see the mind has become distracted, that's wandered off somewhere else, you gently bring it back and you say, put it back on your object of meditation. It might be a mantra, for example. Repeating a mantra is one of the common practices. But continually, you say, this is the only thing I'm going to think about right now. Anything else, you let it go, and you try to bring the mind back to the object of your meditation. In this way, gradually, the mind comes under your control. Instead of the mind doing what it wants to do, and in most cases, the mind is doing what it wants to do, and it then forces us to do its bidding. Feelings come, reactions come, desires come, all these things come, and then we're impelled to go out and fulfill those desires, fulfill what's coming out of the mind. It's like the person who's say, an alcoholic or an addict. It may be storming, it may be snowing, it may be a blizzard, but his mind will make him run out into the store and go get, what he needs. And so like that, many people we're simply, they're doing the bidding of the mind, and the mind itself is often completely out of control. Deep down, the person goes, I should be better than this. I shouldn't be acting like this or behaving like this. So many people say, I shouldn't. I know I should be doing better than this, but somehow I can't seem to do it. And this is because the mind is kind of forcing them to do what they do, and the mind is just operating on its own kind of autopilot. But now, when you start this practice of meditation, particularly in Raja Yoga, you then begin, instead of taking whatever is kind of flowing up out of the subconscious, you now begin to consciously put in particular thought. Now, a basic principle is that whatever you think, or whatever you do, it creates a samskara, an impression in the mind. And what we are now, the state of our mind now, the state of our consciousness now, is the result of all the impressions that have gone into the mind in the past. They go down into the unconscious, and then they come back up to the surface, and again try to express themselves. So we do something, we liked it, and a little bit later we want to do it again. And so the mind tells us, go do this again. I like that. Things are just coming up out of subconscious and trying to express themselves. And normally, like in most cases, it's just we're operating without any sense of control. Just letting the mind. It's like you get in your car and you just let the car take off, and usually you'll end up in trouble. But so in Raja Yoga, you're learning how to consciously put in, okay, I'm going to think this particular thought now, and then you're consciously putting in samskaras. You're putting in good impressions. And in time, your mind becomes filled with those good impressions. And so, if you may start out, you're very negative, a lot of all kinds of negative things in the mind, but gradually those get eliminated, and what's there are all the good impressions that you've started to put in. The idea behind this is that you can become whatever you want to be. Once you begin to take control over your thoughts, particularly, and over your actions, you can begin to shape your destiny. Where you're at right now is a result of whatever's going on before, and it may be good or maybe bad. But at any moment, you can begin to say, okay, I'm going to begin to take charge of this whole process. And then you can actually shape yourself into whatever you want to be. That capacity is there within each person. And it just takes persistence. Because for a long time, you'll be trying to put in your good thought, and all the old samskaras, the old impressions, they keep coming back, and there's a kind of a battle that goes on. But eventually, the mind can become filled entirely with good impressions, and the mind can be filled entirely with kind of spiritual thoughts that are based on the reality of things. And see, this is one thing to keep in mind, is that all the kind of divine things which the sages, everybody throughout history, which they've experienced, that divine reality, it's always there. It's never been lost. It's always with us at every single moment of our existence. It's not something that we lack and that we have to go get somewhere. It's something simply that we have to become aware of. And this is all of spiritual life. It's only becoming aware of what's actually there. Reminding ourselves. And to do this, you have to kind of remind yourself again and again. I think I'm this human being, I think I'm just physical, but I know there's something else. There's a higher reality there. As you keep reminding yourself about that, gradually it begins to become real to you. And so this is the process in Raja Yoga is kind of a mental gymnastics. You begin to take control of this instrument of the mind. It's something that you're supposed to be using, not that's supposed to be using you, but you take control of the instrument, and then you begin to use it to achieve your ultimate goal. And like I said, the basic technique in Raja Yoga, there's all kinds of different specific practices and things, but the basic technique is simply You take one particular thought. You say, okay, this is the object of my meditation. For the time being, I'm only going to think about this one thought. I'm not going to think about anything else. And then you patiently begin to focus on the thought. Something else comes in, then you bring the mind back, you focus on the thought again. And then gradually, then the mind will settle down and begin to stay on what your thought is, what your object is. And then it gets kind of deeper and deeper and it grows. So there's there's two aspects to the practice. You say quantity and quality. In the early stages, what you're dealing with is mostly is quantity. Out of 100 thoughts, maybe only 2 thoughts are on what you're trying to think about, what you're trying to meditate on, and 98 thoughts are on other things. And then gradually, as you go on with your practice, you'll find, well, maybe not 20 thoughts are on my object and 80 thoughts are there. And slowly, then you begin to increase that so that more and more your thought is staying on the same thing. Now, as you do that, as you gradually begin to be able to maintain your focus on the thing, the quality of your meditation then begins to deepen, begins to intensify. We normally, even if we say, okay, I'm say studying this book or I'm thinking about something, and yes, you would say, okay, I'm thinking about it, and I'm not really thinking too much about other things, but the depth of our thinking, the depth of our kind of consciousness, awareness is very superficial. It's just kind of on the surface. You realize as you go into it deeper, that gradually, not only do you stop being drawn outside, distracted, but gradually you begin to deepen the level of your awareness, the level of your consciousness, and this is where kind of deeper thing will start to unfold. So this is meditation from the standpoint of the Raja Yoga, based on the yoga references of Patanjali. Now in the Vedantic approach to the Jnana Yoga approach to meditation, they have the same basic idea that you're trying to withdraw your attention from the external world, you're trying to bring it within, you're trying to go deeper within into your inner consciousness. But in Jnana Yoga, path of knowledge or Vedanta, the goal is not so much to bring the mind under control as it is to reach that deeper consciousness, that Atma, that spirit within, which is your true self and which is something beyond the mind. Now normally you can only begin to even glimpse that or think about that when you've gotten some control of the mind. When the mind is not running all over the place, when the mind is not always going outwards, then slowly you can begin to then shift and focus on something else. But that ultimate something else that you're seeking is not the mind. The mind is its instrument, but it's the self, it's the consciousness, the awareness that's using the instrument. And the basic definition of it is that it's the Sakshi, it's the witness. Whatever we experience, when you experience this world, when you look out and you see this room and the other people, there's a witness within you that's seeing that, that's aware of that. But it's not that experience. It's something different. In other words, normally we have an experience and our consciousness identifies with it. And then we say, oh, this is me, and this is happening to me. But in fact, it's not happening to you at all. You're just there watching it. I use the example, really, when we see this life, this world, it's actually we're watching a movie. All kinds of things may happen on the movie. Maybe terrible things. But we're just seated in the theater watching it. We're just seated with God, in the life of God, and we're watching life unfold. When you identify with what's happening, which is our normal state, whatever happens has a tremendous impact on you. Sometimes it will make you happy, or other times it will make you miserable. But our reality, our experience is dominated by what's going on. By what other people are doing, by what the world's doing, what the economy's doing. All these things have the capacity to make us happy or unhappy. But when you begin to just stand back, kind of detach, and stand back into this kind of witnessing position, remembering, okay, these things are going on, all kinds of problems are there, things like that, but that's not me. I'm not in that. I'm just watching it. Then you begin to completely transform the kind of quality of your life, of your experience. As you become, take more of this witnessing position, two things will happen. One is that the world and the things that happen in life, the things that happen, it will begin to have less effect over you. It'll still go on, and it may disturb you a little bit, or it may make you a little happy, but it won't affect you the way it did before. Yeah, it becomes much milder in the effect. I've given other talks before, the idea that really, if we find ourselves unhappy, if we find ourselves suffering for some reason or something, our tendency is always to blame somebody else. It's always say, well, I'm not happy because this happened, or this person did this, or this happened. But what we have to realize is that no matter what happens, we're the only ones that create unhappiness within ourselves. Because unhappiness is our reaction to things. You have the event, you have the thing that happened, but it's your reaction determines whether that event makes you happy or unhappy. And the same event can make one person happy, another person unhappy. Depending on what they like and dislike. And so as you begin to detach, you'll start to get back into this position of equanimity. The Gita says equanimity is yoga, meaning you want to be in a position where you're stable, you're not depending. This is the important thing, is you're not depending. It doesn't mean you hate other people, that you reject other people, or that you try to escape from the world, but you're no longer depending on other people for your happiness, or on other events or other situations. You're learning, okay, I'm solid here, I'm kind of standing in myself, sitting comfortably, watching the show, and then you find your balance there. Otherwise, everything that happens is like pushes you this way, pushes you that way, pushes you, and always you're reacting to it and trying to juggle it and trying to deal with it. But when you start to step back a bit and start to get your balance, then you see everything becomes stable. And this is usually the first kind of benefit or sign of progress along the way, is that you start to become calmer. You don't get ecstatic joy, you don't get fantastic visions or anything, but you just find yourself getting kind of calm and balanced and peaceful. So the world starts to lose its effect when you start to get detached from the mind. This is as where you have the body and then you have the mind. Now when you start to get detached from the mind, then the mind begins to lose its domination over you. There's a big difference between saying, I'm angry, and there's anger going on in the mind, and I'm here watching it. Normally, when an emotion, a strong desire, emotion, something comes into the mind, we say, okay, I'm angry, that's me, yeah? And then we may then try to fight the anger, not to express it, not to say something, but it still upsets us a great deal. But when you can stand back and say, okay, there's anger here in the mind, I watch it for a while, after a while it goes away, something else comes, then that anger is no longer controlling you, because now you realize you're something different than that anger. And so just as we can get some detachment from the external world and the events and things that go on there, we can start to get some detachment from our inner world and the mind, and because the mind, it can be most wonderful tool that we have, if we can develop it, but it can also be the most terrible thing. People who have mental suffering just go through, live in pure hell, and it's all just creations of the mind, and then they identify with it. But the second thing that happens is where first that things start to not dominate you, not control you so much. Second thing is you gradually start to become aware of what the underlying reality of things is. When you begin to detach from your physical experiences and begin to attach from your mental experiences, you'll gradually start to become aware of reality, of who I am, of who I really am. And as you do that, you also become aware of what the world is, who other people are, what's going on. And in this process, gradually the divinity of things, the glory of things, so kind of the love of things, this then begins to slowly unfold from within. And when we grab hold of physical experience, our consciousness is determined by what my physical experiences are. When we grab hold of mental experiences, good moods, bad moods, things like that, then our consciousness, our reality is determined by what kind of mental state we're in. But when you kind of let go of those things and start to stand back and just be yourself, then you begin to become aware of what the true reality of it. And this, then, is where you begin to see, experience everything as the unfoldment of spirit. This is, as we look out at the world, even. One person looks at the world and sees a terrible place. Terrible, full of people he doesn't like, full of fears, full of worries, all kinds of threats and coming from every direction. It sees a terrible place. Another person looks at the world and sees basically a happy place. Depending on the person's nature, you'll see other people's happy. He'll see basically joyous world. But as a person begins to go deeper, then he'll see everything unfolding as the manifestation of the infinite glory and divinity of God. Same world for two different people. One person it's a terrible place. For one person it's a very happy, joyful place. For another person it's a magnificent, beautiful place. Use the example how there can be a rock beside the sidewalk. And every day, 100 people walk by that rock, and nobody notices, nobody pays it any attention. Then one day an artist goes by, and he sees that rock, and he says, oh, what a beautiful rock. Look at all the different veins and colors and things there. And he sees tremendous beauty in that rock. For everybody else, it was just an ordinary rock, not worth anything. But the artist had the eyes to see the beauty, and so for him it becomes something very wonderful. In the same way, most of us, we go through life seeing things, seeing other people, and just not attaching, not seeing anything, of value there. But as a person transforms his state of consciousness, he begins to become aware that even in the ordinary things, everything that seemed just ordinary every day before, they're now filled with a divine beauty, with a wonderful thing. I'm just reading the article that David Hawkins' book on non-dual devotional. Anyway, he's saying that how in that state, every single person is just a object of beauty. He said even what the world calls ugly people, he said seem highly very beautiful for the person who's attained that. Swami Varadananda, he said once that as a person goes, as he gets into deeper meditation, deeper spiritual experience, he reaches a point where he begins to realize that, oh, I'm spirit within. And then he says after he begins to discover this spiritual level of his own being, then he realizes this same wonderful spiritual being is in everybody else. And then he said that just as in ordinary human love, that when we love someone, we see that person as beautiful. We see, even in their faults, we see something very beautiful, like the mother with her child. The child may be naughty, the child may be all kinds of faults, but for the mother, that child is wonderful, very beautiful. He said, now if this is the case even in ordinary human love, imagine how when you begin to realize that the divine God, who's the most lovable thing in the universe, and this is Swami Vivekananda. In one place we have a quote down on the calendar that says, God is nothing but love. Love in the beginning, love in the middle, and love in the end. And when you realize that this most lovable reality is also there, expressing, it's all different people, he said, your whole attitude towards people, towards life changes, is transformed, and now you see that beauty there, and instead of relating to the world and to other people that are very personal, I like this person, I don't like that person, now you see everything operating on a very kind of sacred, spiritual level. And this is the reality of the things, is that you are, every place you are is sacred. Every place you are is the temple of God because God's presence is there. And I said everything we do, every action we take is worship because it's an offering to God. But it depends on what type of consciousness we live with, what type of consciousness we work with. This determines the quality that we experience. It doesn't mean that it's not God, but it simply means we're not aware of it. And so this is in Jnana Yoga, the path of Vedanta, the goal is primarily to touch, to be able to experience that underlying consciousness, which is beyond even the mind, to be able to experience that and have it become an actual reality in your life. And then everything else ultimately will come out of that. So this is the, but none of this will happen until we begin a process of changing, shifting the state of our consciousness. I said, as long as our consciousness is totally absorbed in the physical and the external, that's what our consciousness will be. That's what our awareness will be. As we move within, we begin to open up all the wonderful experiences that can come through the mind and through the mental activities and knowledge and inspiration, things like that. But then, as we go deeper still to the spiritual level, then that becomes our reality. And we can still be in the world, still be doing our work, still be functioning in the world, but still, at the same time, be aware of the spirituality, of the divinity of things. And then you live in a kind of wonderful world that the ups and downs of life, which are always there, sometimes good things happen, sometimes what we call bad things happen, those things, instead of, you no longer depend on those things, you're no longer overly concerned with those things. You're finding your own inner bliss and happiness, and you live in that, and it's completely satisfying, and then everything else becomes a great joy. As you begin to realize your own spiritual nature, you also begin to realize that everything else has spiritual nature too. And so instead of living in this competitive jungle of everybody fighting and struggling with each other, you're now living in harmony with this wonderful unity of things, this oneness of things. And then, no matter what kind of physical conditions you're in, whether you're rich or poor or anything else, then none of that matters because you've found, and this is also, at this point, you've found what you've been seeking. Everybody is searching for something. Deep down, there's this sense of, there's something missing, there's something I'm trying to find. We try to find it in the world. We think if I can get more money or better relationships or this or that, I'll find it. If I can, we try to find it in the mind, if I can understand more or learn more. But ultimately, when you find it in your inner self, in your inner spirit, then you know, okay, this is it. This is what I've been seeking. This is my home. And now you're completely settled. And so this is a necessity and the importance of meditation. Like I said, regardless of which specific technique or method, he said you're trying to eventually attain awareness, union with that deep kind of inner spiritual reality, which is there at the core of everybody. It's not just in Christ or Buddha or different teachings, is that same thing which we see there is the inner self of each and every person. It's always with us. It's closer to us than hands and feet and breathing. It's never lost. It's only forgotten. And we were just trying to reverse that process. So this was a talk that Swami's been talking now on meditation. Why should we meditate, and theory and the practice, and so this kind of what we talked about. So now Swami is going to be in Los Angeles or in California up until Friday. So I will then take his Tuesday class on Gospel Shamakrishna. Then on Friday we have our regular class on Katha Upanishad. I think next Sunday or Saturday we have Ramnam or Shivanam coming. Yeah. And then next Sunday talks on Swami Varadananda. So here we go. Om Asatoma Sadhyam Tamasoma Jyotirgam Mrityurmam Amritam Gamya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. Peace, peace.